Welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News with Beth and Elizabeth.
Hi, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. We rate and review articles, discuss basically anything about fake news, and have on guests who like to talk about fake news as well.
And I'm Beth.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And has it only been 2 weeks since our last episode?
Yeah, I think so. But in Trump-adjusted time, it feels like it's been a couple of years.
I forgot about Trump-adjusted time. No wonder we have so many announcements to make.
Like what? What do you got for us, Beth?
Well, for starters, this is kind of exciting. We decided to buy the domain for www.podcastfakenews.com and put up a real website.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, our old website was a freebie one through our podcast host. And
it was rubbish.
Yeah, it wasn't that great. We did appreciate it, that it was available for us, but it wasn't the best. Yeah, it was very basic, and it just had the links to our old episodes, and it was, well, here's the thing. Nobody ever went there. So it was fine. But now we have an actual website. And, you know, I mean, it's still kind of basic, but it's at, podcastfakenews.com. And I've gone through and I've blogged all of our old episodes. So we have a much better episode guide for you. And there's audio links.
Really nice, Beth, by the way. It looks super, super nice. I think that people are going to like it.
Oh, good. Thank you. So there's like an audio link at the top of each episode guide, so you can listen to the episode right on your desktop. And since it's a blog, you can comment and interact with each other. So that'll be really fun.
Cool. And we've also added an additional blog on the website for announcements and anything that's not an episode.
Yeah, that's right. So go check out the new website, the episode guides, the blog.
And actually, the first blog on there is one of our other announcements. We are now on YouTube and iHeartRadio. So all over the place, it's getting pretty big. You know, we're on Facebook, Twitter. Now we got blogs and real websites and the YouTubes. And are we going to be able to stay on top of all of this?
Well, that's actually our next announcements. We have, I won't say hired, I'll say found an unpaid intern to
Was she a homeless person off the side of the road?
No.
Is that where you found her?
No, she has a home.
Just the way you said it.
I was browsing in this antique shop and I found her. It said unpaid intern. No, I have recruited someone.
Is she really old? Why was she in an antique shop? Are you sure this?
No, that's where you find things. Like,
are you sure she's going to be able to do our social media?
Yes, I'm 100% sure. She speaks social media, believe me. Nice. So she's going to be handling our social media. And the best part about her is her name, which is Betty.
One of us.
So yes, we have Beth, Elizabeth, and now Betty, which is fitting because we decided in the beginning that anyone connected with this podcast had to have a variation of the name Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm. It is an organizing principle on the podcast, yeah.
Yeah, we had actually talked, we were joking one time about if we ever started a media company, we'd call it Elizabethan Media. Remember that?
I remember, yeah.
It's still on our to-do list. So Betty's getting up to speed on everything, and she's going to start doing some posting for us and even get us out there on more sites like Tumblr.
What's a Tumblr?
I have no idea. That's why we need Betty.
Betty to the rescue. Thank you, Betty.
I love you already.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we have done a really great interview with Miss Maggie Farley, and that is going to be coming up. We just want to let you guys know that there were some issues with her audio. We had issues from the beginning with it, and we kind of tried to make the best of it and really tried to get it as good as we could. And so I just want to be upfront about that and let everyone know, but it is definitely worth a listen. She is an amazing person and has some really fascinating things to say.
She has the best quotes.
Yeah.
The best. I've written them down. We'll review them after. I don't want to ruin them for anybody. But oh my gosh, she's just really, we just talked about so much stuff. And I, like Elizabeth said, and Elizabeth has worked so hard on this. Thank you, Elizabeth. Bear with the audio, try and get through it, and just actually listen to what she's saying, because there is some good information there.
Yeah. So Maggie Farley, who used to be a journalist, and now works for the American University. And you'll see in a minute why I'm making that point.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's take you on into the episode.
The cornucopia of fake news is expansive. And today we're going to be talking about journalism, proper journalism. And we have Maggie Farley with us from the American University, who is a correspondent for the Los Angeles Times and is a journalistic badass. Welcome, Maggie.
Yay!
I used to be a correspondent for the LA Times, and now I'm teaching at AU, and I've been doing a fellowship on the intersection of journalism and technology. But fake news has become a big issue.
So Elizabeth just stated some fake news right up in the beginning. Sorry about that.
I did? What'd I say?
You said she is a correspondent. She used to be.
No, well, that's not what I meant to say. Yeah. I meant to say she was a correspondent. I'm pretty sure that's what came out of my mouth.
Well, I like to say I'm a recovering journalist. Like, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic.
Yes, I could see that. I could definitely see that. It gets in the blood and you can't get rid of it.
So, Maggie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. Let's talk about you a little bit. We're very interested in you.
So, I was a journalist for the LA Times for 14 years. I was a foreign correspondent in Asia, Japan, Hong Kong, China, covering Southeast Asia too.
Okay, wow. Can we just stop you right there and just give you a big wow?
And then came back to the States and covered the United Nations during the whole run-up to the Iraq War.
Oh, boring.
WMD is the ultimate fake news story.
No, I'm totally kidding. That sounds fascinating.
Wow.
Well, the other part of my beat was Canada. So make of that what you will.
Maple syrup. We love it.
Mm-hmm. Timmy Hose. Yeah.
Yep. We're all about Canada.
And so about 3 months before the LA Times went bankrupt, I took the buyout when we moved to Washington, D.C. And I used that money to start a little ed tech startup called Lucky Grasshopper, which was an app to teach kids Chinese characters.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. And so from there, I got into educational technology, and then the journalism and technology thing just followed right on.
So we found you because you developed a game about fake news, oddly enough. And we love anything fake news. So we were like, what? A game about fake news? Can we play?
So we like to think of it as fake news meets Tinder. It's called Factitious, and the mobile version, you swipe right for real news and left for fake news. And it's kind of fun to play on the subway or something because you're just swiping right and left, and people think you're really going to have a hot weekend.
Wow. I think Fake News Meets Tinder is the name of this episode.
Oh, that's a good one. Love it. Love it.
We've also been paid the ultimate compliment, which is two other organizations have also come out with fake news games that use the swiping interface.
Oh, so you are like the ground. You were in on the ground. You were the what do you call it?
Originator.
The original. What do they call it when you're like set the pace, like the pace setter?
The people who set the pace, yeah. Pace setters.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking, I'm thinking of a word and it's not coming. That happens in your 40s a lot.
That's okay, Beth. We can edit, yeah.
Groundbreaker,
I
whatever.
know.
Anyway.
Yes, groundbreaker. Thank you, Maggie. So how did this game come to be then, Factitious? How did it go from your brain to our phones?
So this is kind of fun. I had been working with the News Literacy Project, which is based in Washington. It was founded by a colleague of mine from the LA Times. And it's a program that teaches high school students how to know what to believe and how to parse the news. It started really small in a local high school, but we're here in Washington, so all of these famous journalists would come and talk to the students about how they got that story and how to know whether to trust that source and how to check out a story. When I started this fellowship at American University, I thought this would be a great thing to turn into a game. So I started talking to my colleagues there, and this was 2 years ago. This was before fake news with a capital F and a capital N was a thing. We were just sort of thinking of it in the quaint, old-fashioned way of teaching people to discern news from opinion and news from parody and even news from advertising.
Right.
You know, there's always been fake news. There's been propaganda and misinformation and disinformation. But as we were developing the game, we had to keep changing it because fake news kept changing. In our very first version of the game, actually in game making, you often start with paper prototypes, and that helps you iron out all the problems before you get into coding and graphic design. So we literally had pieces of cardboards with typing on it, and you'd lift up the flap to see the answer. And then that evolved to an online game, and then it eventually became our Tinder meets fake news. But in the first version of the online game, Donald Trump had just announced his candidacy for president, and he was being covered as an entertainment figure. He wasn't being taken that seriously at all. And we had him in the game in the role that he played on The Apprentice, where someone would do something wrong and he'd like, "You're fired," or "You loser." Oh, gosh. But at a certain point in the game, as his campaign gained momentum, we realized that we can't just use him as sort of a entertainment figure in the game anymore. The game was kind of becoming all about Donald Trump. And then in the end, he became one of the lead generators and propagators of fake news and the term fake news.
Right. Oh my gosh. Did that just kind of make you a little upset that Donald Trump was becoming the theme of your game?
Well, he could no longer be the face of the game, in the game, but he does pop up quite a bit in the game. Stories by him, about him, people making fun of him, people making up news about him. And a really interesting thing happened during the presidential campaign, and that was on Facebook, people shared fake political news even more than they shared real political news. That sort of let everybody know this is a problem here. People, sometimes they can tell the difference and they just like to pass it on because it's entertaining or it confirms their beliefs or whatever. But we were also concerned that people couldn't tell the difference. So that was one of the driving forces behind the game, which is to kind of subtly teach people how to discern the difference between real news and fake news. So when you play the game, we have it divorced from context like you would see it on a Facebook feed. So you don't see that it's from the Washington Post or from the Onion. It's just the story. Mm-hmm. And at the bottom of the story, you can click on a button that says source, and that will tell you where it came from. And actually, the source is the single most important bit of information when you're trying to discern whether a story is credible or not.
That's true.
That Denver Post bit of fake news that was quite popular there for a while.
Post is real.
I know
Denver
people
Post is real. It was the Denver something else.
What was it? The Chronicle. It was something like that, or the Herald. It was something.
It was a Denver one that played off of a real newspaper name. Yes,
that was. It was seeing the name of it, though, seeing the source. People thought, that just sounds like such a reasonable paper. Like that's a real paper, you know. So that was really interesting.
I am so skeptical now. I was reading an article earlier by the San Francisco Examiner, and I was like, "Is this real?" Like you have to double check everything.
Well, on the mobile, not the mobile version, on the desktop version of the Factitious that we saw through the npr.org, I got all of them right except for one. And it was the Mississippi Herald, I think. And that was what caught me. I thought, okay, that sounds good. That sounds like a real thing. And I was wrong.
I got one wrong too. And I had clicked on the source, but I felt like it was cheating to go check if the source was real or not before I swiped, and then I got it wrong, and I was like, oh no, I'm checking. I'm not taking any more chances. I gotta pulled up all my websites. I'm like, all right, let's see, is this real or not? That one's not real. Okay, false.
That's funny because we originally had it as a button on the bottom that said hint. And then we found out that game players will not click on a hint. They think it's cheating.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So whenever you're teaching people about critical thinking and how to look at journalism, I guess you have to tell them it's okay. You can research. It's not cheating.
So we changed it from hint to source. And in the classroom version, the teacher can adjust the scoring settings. So the students will get more points if they sought more information.
Oh, nice.
Oh, very good.
I like it.
So what made you feel like you really needed to get involved in the fight against fake news?
That's a good question. It seemed obvious. It seemed that with the advent of the internet, anybody can be a publisher, but not everybody follows journalism standards. And so it's very confusing if you're just cruising around the internet, and especially if you're a high school student or someone who doesn't know about these protocols and these fact-checking standards, that legitimate news organization, if they make a mistake, they'll correct the mistake.
Right.
That there are layers of editors and fact-checking that stories should go through.
Like the row.
Yes, what was it? The triad or something?
The triad, yeah. It's been rowed.
Yeah. We did a story about, or we did an episode about the whole CNN James O'Keefe thing, and that was just something that came up, that how normally when CNN does an article, it goes through this process of like going through like editorial, like lawyers look at it sometimes. It hasn't been rowed, and it's just like a little verb they use. We thought that was pretty cool, a little journalistic slang.
We're like, we want to know journalistic slang.
Well, lawyered is a good one.
Has this been lawyered? That is something you would say?
You don't actually want the lawyer getting their hands in your story. I mean, it's not like an editor who might make it better.
Oh, that's a good point.
Oh, okay.
Insert this 3-sentence legal clause right in the middle of your story.
You're like, let me put an asterisk around that. That's funny. Oh my gosh. We've talked a lot about being okay with the fact that real journalists make mistakes sometimes, and that's okay. And it's about the response to it, and that they correct it, and, they do updates, and that's normal, and that should be expected, and we shouldn't be calling that fake news.
Right. I mean, we say in the newsroom, the old school newsroom saying is that journalism is a rough draft of history. Yeah.
Oh,
nice.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's another one of those chestnuts along with, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out.
This episode is going to be ripe for T-shirt quotes.
Yes. When we get the merch up and going. Good stuff. Yeah. So what do you hope that the game that you've developed will help people achieve?
We've actually done a bit of, being at a university, try to do it in an academically rigorous way. And so we did a lot of play testing and evaluations, and found that people who played the game and looked at the answers in the end, there's a little explanation with each answer about why you got it right or wrong. People who played the game actually felt like they learned what red flags to look for in a real news story or a fake news story. And the people that we talked to and who filled out the surveys said that they actually did take that knowledge out into the world, and it made them a little bit more aware. So we consider that a win.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
I saw in the NPR article that you'd said that it's an open source game. Can you explain that to me and what that means?
So the Knight Foundation, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, you always hear them touted on NPR, but they're great funders of journalism experiments and programs in the United States. One of the requirements of getting a Knight grant is that whatever you make has to be accessible to everybody. And so all the source code is open, and we developed it so newsrooms could use it on their sites and adapt it to their own stories, and classrooms could use it, and teachers and students could feed in their own stories.
So basically the code for it is available for people to kind of manipulate to their means. I'm understanding it. Okay.
And we will give a newsroom or a classroom or a developer access to the database, and we'll make a clone, and then it's closed and limited for your own organization. And then you can input your own data.
Has anybody done that yet?
We're
with you guys?
Offering it to the News Literacy Project to use in classrooms around the country. They've got a digital curriculum, so this fits right in with that. One thing that people can't do is take it and use it for profit. So the other groups that have very similar things to ours, and they were probably developed in parallel, but I have to say I did reach out to both of them to collaborate and said, look at our sweet Tinder interface. So they're nonprofits. We're open source. So we're just going to take it as a compliment that these things out there look similar.
Oh, there you go.
Imitation is the best form of flattery.
There you go.
People use it and use it to learn from it. And there's a group of psychology grad students at University of Wisconsin, I think, who want to look at our analytics and analyze how people make decisions and how people judge news. And so it's spawning all sorts of interesting little projects that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, I think, fake news is so big and it's such a big problem that I think anything that anybody can do to help fight it is welcome and great. So I love your attitude that, you're seeing it as complimenting what you're doing.
Yeah. And it seems like, unfortunately, fake news is here to stay.
It's everywhere. And all over the world. And people are using templates now to try to influence the French election, the German election that's coming this fall.
Oh, I love templates. Just not for fake news.
We use this big template to help us when we're analyzing a story to see if it's fake or not.
Yeah. And
we have this big template that we use, and Beth is just like, the template. Let me talk about the template.
And she's like, stop talking about the template.
Well, Beth, no one cares about the template. Don't talk about the template anymore on our show. Jeez.
Oh, Maggie, I have to ask you, I have had in my life probably a million ideas, and it's one of those things, you think about something or you see something, you're like, that is such a good idea. And I mean, you very rarely actually see it come to life. So how awesome is it to see this idea that was a light bulb in your head become a reality?
It was fabulous. We were just kind of brainstorming at AU in the JOLT program in the very first meeting. And I said, I'd love to make this idea into a game. And the guy I was talking to was a developer. He's like, yeah, we could do that. And I know a really great programmer. And then AU said, I think Knight would love to fund that. We'll take some of our Knight money and put it towards that. So it's not often that you have a light bulb go off and it lights up everybody else in the room who can help you achieve that dream.
Yes, and then you also had to be in the room with the people who can help you out. So it just seems like this all just worked out really well.
I think partners are critical.
I think partners that do the editing for you, especially.
I think partners that the day after you tell them your idea, they call you and say, so when are we doing this? I ordered a microphone. They're critical.
I love you too, Beth.
Your origin story. I'm hearing it.
Yes. I called Elizabeth one day and was like, I have to tell you something. I want to start a podcast about fake news. And she was like, I'd do that with you. And I was like, oh, you would? Let's do it.
Yeah. So then you had to do a podcast about fake news.
Well, that's awesome. But if I could go back to the templates.
Of course.
Well, there were some, politically motivated fake news groups here in the States who made up templates and instructed people how to make fake social media identities in France to try to influence the Macron election. And they even suggested memes. And one of the memes was Macron is gay. His marriage to his wife, who's older than he is.
Mm-hmm.
about the same number of years as Trump is older than Melania, by coincidence. Another meme was Macron is actually having an affair with his wife's daughter, who's 31.
Ugh.
And they provided
gross.
the pictures, and they provided the French slogan, and they just said, go out there and spread this around.
So, Maggie, what do you think? I don't know if you're familiar, with the case of Hulk Hogan versus Gawker and the implications of that. We talked about the Netflix documentary about that. What is that documentary called, Beth?
Nobody Speak. Trials of the Free Press.
So we watched that, and it was fascinating, and it was so good. And it just kind of made us think about how important it is to have a free press. And we have this inclination to want to say, oh, this is fake news. We need to stamp it out. We need to just get rid of it. I'm going to identify you as fake news, and you're gone. You're not on Facebook anymore. You're not on Twitter anymore. You don't have a platform. But watching that documentary, it kind of made me think, oh, that's dangerous.
Even if you don't like what Gawker did, they've done a lot of sort of crazy and sensationalist things. You kind of have to defend it in the name of the First Amendment. The thing that complicates it is that Hulk Hogan's friends set him up with his own wife, and released the tapes. So, who's culpable there?
Yeah.
Anyway, Gawker also did a story. They outed an administration official who went to a hotel and met a young man for hire, and he had a wife and kids, and they decided they were going to follow him and write about it. And I think that it was a political setup. And in that case, I thought that is indefensible because they were carrying somebody else's water. I mean, they were the axeman for somebody with a political agenda, and it ruined this guy's life. So I think that First Amendment shouldn't protect hatchet jobs like that. But the Hulk Hogan thing, very complicated, but makes us all feel a bit conflicted. But in the end, I think that reporting was protected.
Well, the way that I was thinking about it is that, if someone is producing something that is demonstrably false, just objectively false, then
Breitbart.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be protected. But then, you say there should be some way to maybe address this so that we aren't having to deal with so much bad information.
It is a slippery slope because who decides what's truth? And do you want the government in charge of deciding that for you?
Nope, that's why we started this podcast. I think one of my goals for us as a fake news podcast and, future global empire is I could almost see us doing like a rating for sites, like kind of like Rotten Tomatoes does for movies, or how the MPA rates movies. None of that is regulated by the government, but they have a really good system there of rating that helps people understand what it is before they go into it. And I think that would be a great resource for news sites and for, bloggers, that kind of thing, to be able to have a rating to show whether or not you're a trusted source. By Beth and Elizabeth.
Oh, that's kind of
I haven't told Elizabeth this yet. She doesn't know. She didn't know my nefarious plans for our podcast until right now.
Well, you know what? Somebody made a Chrome plugin that tries to do just that.
Trusted Times? Yeah, it's a really good tool.
Oh, and there's another one called This Is Fake.
Oh, nice.
Aptly named.
It takes a village of fake news fighters. So,
but it'd be interesting to look into how they each evaluate the websites. And some are based on a source that a journalism professor made when fake news is becoming a big issue. Some are based on how old the website is and how much traffic it gets. Some fake news sites are satire sites, and they'll tell you right on the site if you go to About Us or something, a disclaimer saying, everything on our site is true except for the lies.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in satire sites labeling up front because I love satire. I love news jokes. I just want to know that that's what it is up front. So
Right.
I really like it when it's labeled.
It's the ones who are not transparent that we have to be concerned about. And so...
Yeah. Or they get too close to the truth, you know.
Yes.
And then it's just confusing. And it's when it's The Onion, it's fine because everybody knows The Onion.
Some representatives.
Well, that's true. Except for maybe the bots. I don't know.
Like there was some congressman who was all up in arms because of something that he read on The Onion.
Yeah.
And he was tweeting about it. That was great.
Oh, yeah, that happens more often than you realize.
Yeah, I guess that's true even for The Onion, but it is more generally recognized right off the bat. People do know it is satire right off the bat, where there's some other ones that, you know, they're just not as well known, or they're even more like regional. Like the red shtick is regional for Louisiana.
Yes.
And if you don't live there, you're in, you know, you don't really know. So I like it when they label it.
And then there are sites that are intentionally mimicking better-known sites, like there's one that copies ABC instead of...
Yes, like ABC News Go or something. It's close, but not quite. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just going to go on another point about using technology to kind of filter fake news. So a lot of people are up in arms saying Google and Facebook and Twitter were the main amplifiers of fake news, and so they should have the responsibility to do something to filter it. And so they got together and decided to partner up with a consortium of fact checkers.
Pointer, I believe.
Yeah, Pointer put it together. So it's factcheck.org, PolitiFact, I think the Washington Post.
Yeah, that one's on there.
And Snopes. And so if somebody, for example, on Facebook, there's a little arrow that you can click on. It'll give you a drop-down menu, and it'll say, I think that this story is false, or the story should be checked out. And it will put that story in a pool that's sent to the fact checkers, and they'll make a judgment on it. And if they think that it's false, then there will be a banner across that story as it's circulated around Facebook saying, this story has been disputed. They don't actually judge it as false or real. They just say it's been disputed. And then Twitter was playing with an algorithm that evaluated how many people who were verified users were retweeting stories as a basis of trying to judge whether a story was credible or not. But they haven't actually come out with it. And then Google was actually putting up fact check boxes on some searches for news stories, saying this story has been fact checked and it has been found to be false.
I think those are all really good tools, and it will help. To be honest, I do a lot of Googling of fake stories for this podcast, and I haven't seen Google once come up and say anything about it. I haven't seen much on Facebook either, but I feel like I've cleared out my feed enough that I'm not getting the fake news.
I feel like I'm not, it's just not coming into my feed as much. Like things are quieter right now. And, you know, people, when 2018 comes around and starts kicking up, then it'll be on.
Well, this is the thing. All of these things were announced to great fanfare when they came out. Like, look what we're doing to fight fake news. And I tested them all out and I saw them all. And now that you mention, I haven't seen any of them in the last couple of months. And so I wonder whether their efforts had been abandoned because they didn't work, or it was just for show, or the technology has gotten ahead of that already. It's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I wonder. And I feel like on Facebook, like I definitely thinned out my friends list, and I definitely, block some people. So I feel like I personally, probably reduced the amount of fake news that I was seeing coming across my feed. I've also unfollowed some sites just from doing this podcast and learning so much and starting to really understand some of the fake news. I'm not willing to put up with Occupy Democrats.
Right. Like we talked about, like, we were talking to one of our previous interviews, like, so yeah, Manny, like, what if you, what if you follow something and only the occasional story is fake? No, you got to get rid of him. Get him out of your feed. Like, absolutely.
And that was something I had to like process and go through. But now I'm like, duh, why would I want to have to filter through the fake news on that site when I can get much better news from a different source?
And here's the thing. It's not about getting news, okay? And this is why I had a little bit of difficulty pulling the plug on Occupy Democrats and Bipartisan Report. Because when I saw these stories, even though I knew they weren't true and I wasn't forwarding them or anything like that, I got a little like endorphin rush. I got that hit in my brain.
Got your liberal endorphins for the day.
This is enforcing my belief system. I like it,
Right.
And I, unfollowed, and I don't get that endorphin rush anymore. And I like to think of myself as someone, I'm educated, I've studied sciences, I'm a critical thinker, a skeptic, and I knew kind of what was going on there,
Right.
So I do a freaking fake news podcast, for God's sake.
You make a really good point. We are human, and our brains are wired to like fake news because they've done brain scans. And your brain lights up when something is exciting or makes you feel emotional or angry or smug and righteous, like some of the fake news does when it affirms your beliefs. And
sometimes I say to myself, I should follow them because I need source material for the podcast. So I need to know what they're saying. But so far, finding source material has not been a problem. So,
but Bill Palmer goes too far.
Oh, way too far.
we do not like Bill Palmer.
No. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's interesting because in terms of fake stories becoming viral, the more popular they are, the more popular they get. It just feeds the algorithm. So the fact checkers make a big point of not linking to the actual story, but making a copy of it in an archive.
Right. And you know what? We do that too. When we're reviewing articles, I'll make a PDF copy of it so that we don't keep pulling up the link again and again.
Yeah.
The only problem I've had, and actually this is not a problem because 0 people actually use or read my episode guides that I put together with the links. And I can verify that because I have the analytics. 0 people use my episode guides. Thank you. But
do you want me to go look at your episode guide, Beth?
No, I don't.
I don't even look at the episode.
I felt bad that I was putting out these links for these fake articles, but I tried to do it as a PDF link, and I couldn't get it to work because I'm just not good enough at doing that. So, but I don't feel too bad because, like I said, literally 0 people have pulled them up. So I'm not driving traffic to the fake news sites yet.
Well, maybe that will change after today.
I know. Maybe people will be like, there's an episode guide? I've always wanted one.
Well, one thing we played with in the Jolt program at AU was how to build trust in journalism, how to build trust in news stories. And so designed for trust, because trust is a huge problem in journalism. People don't know who to trust anymore. And so one thing we did was break stories down into the pieces that were used to build them and let the reader build the story themselves with the pieces. And found that when people can build the story, then they build their own conclusion and they trust their own conclusion.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And then the Washington Post did an interesting thing with transparency. David Fahrenthold actually won a Pulitzer for his story about Donald Trump's charitable donations that never quite made it to where they were pledged. His pledges that didn't come through. And he did a little video of himself doing his reporting so he could show people how he gets his information, how he follows it up, how he gets his sources, how he checks his facts. And he made a handwritten list, and he would make a phone call and say, Donald Trump pledged $100,000 to you. Did it ever arrive? And they'd say, nope. And he'd write it down on his list and then it would go in his story. So when people can see how a story is created and understand the process, they also tend to trust it more than a story that they just see the headline. Trump doesn't follow through on his pledges. They can actually.
So I have a question. Well, I don't know what you think we can do about this problem. It seems like there's two realities. There's the Fox News right-wing reality, and then there's the reality that the rest of us occupy. And I just really feel like so many people on the conservative side have just been poisoned by the misinformation that comes from Fox News and right-wing media. And they've been told not to trust anything else. Like if it doesn't come from Fox, if it doesn't come from Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart, it can't be believed. And if I'm talking to one of my conservative family members and say, you can't believe what you hear from these people because they're trying to be deceptive. They have an agenda. And they say, well, those people, the New York Times, they have an agenda. Washington Post, they have a liberal agenda. And that's misinformation too. And it just comes like, no, it's not, but it's like, what is it?
It's the fight between.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't see my hand motions.
But no, she's burning her fists together, trying to show you how frustrated she is.
What do we do about that?
Absolutely. Well, Senator Moynihan famously said, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And so this is a battle of facts. What are facts? What is the truth? And I talked to some newscasters, like John Dickinson, for example, who said he would fact check people on air as they were making their claims. And he would say, but that's not really true. And they'd go back and forth. And then their 4-minute interview would be mired in this sort of nitpicking. Yeah. And he felt like it wasn't serving the greater story. And the people who supported the politician he was talking to felt like that politician was being picked on by the liberal media. And it didn't matter if that fact was correct or not because this person was speaking to a greater truth. And so this is one of the big issues. People feel like they have their own truth. They have their own facts. And that's a really tough job for journalists to tackle because, NPR may fact check the State of the Union live, but the people who need to see the facts aren't the NPR listeners. If you do a Venn diagram of diehard Trump supporters and wonky people who are going on the NPR site watching the live annotation, there's not much meeting in the middle.
The overlap. Was it NPR that tweeted out the Declaration of Independence and people lost their minds?
I think it was NPR, yes.
Yeah, and they were like freaking out that like NPR was threatening the country and all this stuff, and they were like, "It's the Declaration of Independence."
Wow,
yes,
that was incredible.
So, Maggie, with your background in journalism, how do you see fake news changing things for the journalists that are, out there on the ground trying to do good work, trying to report the facts, trying to do what they've done in the past?
Well, I think good journalists have to just keep on doing good journalism, which means fact-checking, getting multiple sources, not relying on anonymous sources. All the things that old school journalists do. Mm-hmm. But better journalism isn't going to mean less fake news, unfortunately, because the consumers of really good journalism aren't often the same people who consume a lot of fake news. And it's kind of terrifying for journalists because the tools that are being used to fake news are getting better and better. It's not just Photoshop anymore. There's a new technology that allows people to make lip sync videos where you can literally put words in somebody's mouth.
Wow.
University of Washington just released their tool showing Obama saying whatever they wanted Obama to say.
Wow.
And, recently with this story on CNN that they retracted and 3 journalists ended up losing their jobs over, you can look at that a couple of ways. And one was that, okay, they made a mistake and they show that they're accountable for their mistake and that there are consequences for not doing your job correctly. But I also thought in the back of my mind, what if their really good source was a plant?
Right.
What if it was somebody put there to give them misinformation?
Yes, yeah.
And I think that, this is kind of a dirty tricks White House, and I would not be surprised to see that kind of thing going on.
Ironically, that story was out about the mooch.
Yeah.
Who is now come and gone.
Right.
He burned fast and he
burned bright.
Yeah. And, when I was looking for stories to refresh our game, these Scaramucci stories kept coming. I'm like, oh, this will be great for the game. Oh, but it's real.
Oh, but it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
That's happened to us before when we were researching for this podcast to try to find some stories. So apparently Trey Gowdy was being considered for a replacement for James Comey. We thought there's no way that exists in reality, but here we are.
I know. Head of Communications goes on profane tirade on the record.
I still don't know how that... So this article that we had found that Elizabeth was talking about, it was published the day that James Comey got fired. And it definitely the guy who wrote his kooky up, definitely there was a lot of other things going on in that episode or in that article. But the main fact that he said was true. And we were so shocked when we found out that it was true. I was like, how did he find out that fast?
Maybe he's like Louise Mensch. Maybe he just got one right.
Yeah, that's probably, you know what? I'm gonna sleep better tonight. I think that's what happened. Maggie, I look at places like Vox. It's kind of a newer version of a reputable news source.
They are so interesting. I think they're really on the vanguard of interactive news, of making things really clear. I love their stacks. And I think that a lot of news sites are trying to copy them and assimilate what they're doing well.
What are stacks?
They are stories, short stories. They're basically explainers where you can read as deep in a story as you need to know. So you're like, oh, Middle East peace. Where do I begin with that?
Okay.
You can go to a stack and you can read the first bit, the second bit. You can go as deep as you need to know, because a lot of people find they'd be more interested in the news if they had the background of the story. But you might get one boilerplate paragraph in a story, but it's usually not in there. You have to look it up. So they make it accessible.
That's interesting. I'll have to look for that. We call that the rabbit hole in fake news when we keep clicking and clicking and clicking. All of a sudden, we're talking about Pizzagate, and nobody knows where we got this from. And
yes, I went down the rabbit hole with Pizzagate.
Yes.
Trying to find the origin of that story. I guess it was 4chan, but wow. That's about a mile from where I live, actually. Although I have,
oh my gosh,
I have nothing to do with human trafficking.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
What a mess. Well, Maggie, we really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us. It has been so much fun.
It has been. And you are our official first woman guest on the show.
No way.
Yes, it has been all guys. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. I can try to mansplain something, but...
Yeah. Well, we just have one more question for you before we let you go. We have to know, what is your favorite jam?
Favorite jam? Well, if you mean the kind of jam that you can eat, it's fig jam with a nice soft cheese.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
Okay, you're going to have to email me your address because I have a 50-year-old fig tree in my backyard, and I make fig jam every year.
Wow, I'm so impressed.
So I have jars, Maggie, jars of jam that I can send you.
I'm just impressed. I'd be like, oh, the red kind.
Well, I didn't know whether you meant like, what is my jam, in a hot bath. Put on
Well, it could be interpreted in many ways.
That would be an acceptable answer as well. But yeah, we say spread jam, not lies, because we want to encourage people to, instead of spreading lies around, to just, sit down, have some jam, eat some toast, relax.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was so great to talk to Maggie.
Yes, and hopefully our listeners bared with us through some of those audio issues and got the good stuff out of there.
Yeah, no, it was really worth it. So yeah. But we want to talk a little bit too before we go about one of the articles that we found on the Factitious site.
Yeah. So the headline of this article is called "Decatur Man Discovers Bride is His Own Granddaughter. No Plans to Divorce." And this was posted on, it says last updated 7/22 of 2017. There's no author listed, and this is by the Alabama Observer. I did run Alabama Observer through Media Bias Checker, and they said it's a questionable source, that the Alabama Observer is a website that's attempting to look like a real Alabama newspaper. They publish a combination of real and fake news, which I thought that was actually pretty gracious to say that it's even a combination. They are on PolitiFact's fake news list as well.
I guess this is just the kind of stuff you observe in Alabama, huh?
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, did you read this article?
Yeah. No, it's pretty funny. I mean, you know what? No, it's not. It's not funny. Let me back that truck up a little bit.
Okay, reverse. All right. Start over. What do you want to say about this article?
It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to stereotype people from Alabama.
Yeah, you know what? This, I looked on the PolitiFact link about how the Alabama Observer is a fake news site, and guess where it's actually published in? Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, I was going to say, this doesn't sound like something that, someone deep in the heart of Alabama would probably put out.
And it made me realize, like, I took a step back and I was like, okay, I've never been to Alabama, and this is kind of the stereotypical thing that people think about Alabama, is that you marry your granddaughter or you marry your cousin and all this kind of stuff. And granted, earlier in the episode, when Maggie mentioned Canada, I did mention maple syrup. So we all...
That's just true. That's not...
We all generalize and stereotype a little bit. But I hadn't even thought about that with this. But if you live in Alabama, this is probably not your actual reality.
Probably
not. Do you think I should cut out that probably and say, if you live in Alabama, this is not your reality?
No, you don't do the cutting. I'm definitely going to leave you saying probably.
No. I didn't mean editing, cutting. I just meant, whatever. I'm going to say probably too many times now. But basically, this article goes through and talks about a man who got married and then through social media discovered that it was actually his own granddaughter, and they have no plans to divorce. Now, Factitious, what they say about this, so I went in and I purposely swiped for truth because I wanted to see what it would say.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and it said, this is a tricky fake news story made up to get ad revenue. The Alabama Observer is a fake news site with no contact or publisher information. There are no named sources in the article, and this website is full of clickbait ads. So this definitely is one where, I mean, there wasn't a Snoops on it.
Oh my God.
There wasn't a Snopes on it. There wasn't like anything that contradicted the story anywhere. So this is one where you actually need to apply some common sense and kind of look at this website and this article to see, should I trust this source? So one of the big things for me when I was reading this article is the last paragraph was a really big indicator that this is probably not a reputable news source. So let me read this for you, okay? It says, in other news-making headlines, a 36-year-old Pensacola man was caught in the act of having intercourse with a horse at a guest ranch in Mississippi. The ranch's owner confronted the Florida man who claimed that the horse had seduced him.
Those Clydesdales, I bet that's what it was. I've been seduced by more than one of those.
Oh, yeah. Drinking a Budweiser, maybe. So obviously this is not something that you would read and be like, this sounds legit, right? Right. So, we just wanted to go over for fun one of those articles from Factitious.
Well, and what was so funny is that last paragraph reminds me, I just have to do a little plug for this subreddit that I follow that I just adore. It's hilarious. It's called Florida Man. People post articles, like news stories that say in it, Florida man does blah, blah, blah. So I've pulled it up right now. And Florida man sent child porn to TV anchor, sheriff says.
So is it like a satire subreddit or like?
No, it's real news.
It's real news about people in Florida. Like if there's a headline that says Florida man, they'll stick it in there.
Yes. And I think that maybe it doesn't have to actually say Florida man. Like it's better if it does, sure. But whenever you do the post, you put Florida man in there,
Gotcha.
Florida man engages in sexual activity while stealing a trailer.
Now, see, this is how the Florida man gets the stereotype is they're actually doing this shit. Lordy land.
See, now here's one that's interesting that they've put it in the title of the post. It's not the title of the article. The title of the post says, white Florida man to be first ever executed for killing a black Florida man.
Oh, so what's going on there?
Well, for the first time in Florida history, it seems like a white person is being executed for the killing of a black person.
Wow. So these are all, from what you've these are basically true articles that people are posting on this subreddit. It's not a lot of satire or fake news or anything like
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Wow. That is interesting. Well, Miss Maggie, as we were talking to her, was such a gem with her quotes that I wrote down some of these quotes and pulled them up. So in case you two were like, oh, I love that. I want to keep that. Here's a couple of the ones that she had said. She said, journalism is a rough draft of history. And I looked that up. It was first attributed to Alan Barth, who was a Washington Post reporter in like the 40s and 50s. And he used to say that a lot in his articles. And then there was if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out.
That's so great.
That was such a great one. It was contributed to a now defunct news source in Chicago called City News Service. And the Chicago Tribune ended up buying them and basically closed that down and put up something different instead. But that is basically, if you Google that saying, it's all over for like journalism tenets. Like if you are in journalism, that is like, you should have that on a plaque on your wall because I read a story about this reporter that had gotten a call for an obituary. And, they're like, yeah, no problem, send it over. And just through the course of trying to post it and figuring out that this, where they wanted to send the flowers in lieu of, was a fake place, they ended up actually talking to the person who the obituary was about. and found out that it was a revenge obituary from an ex-girlfriend. So this particular newspaper was going to start fact-checking their obituary notices before putting them out. So, and he mentioned that quote as this was the reminder, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. So the other quote that she had mentioned was, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And she'd mentioned at the time that was Senator Moynihan, which it was. He passed away in the early 2000s. But I just thought that 3 great quotes. Just so awesome. So
good stuff.
Yeah. So want to wrap it up here?
Sure. Yeah. So we just encourage you to go check out our Patreon page and follow us on Twitter at Podcast Fake News, and like us on Facebook, and come check out the website and the episode guides. They're really fabulous. And while you're on Patreon, throw a couple of bucks in the bin and get a little treat.
So we actually have a treat coming out for you guys. We are going to release a bonus episode in probably, a day or so? What do you think?
Sometime in the not too distant future.
Yeah. We spoke with Christian Picciolini, who is the co-founder of the organization Life After Hate, and he is a former white nationalist. And we spoke with him about propaganda and Nutella. So 2 subjects that I also hold dearly to my heart. No, we had an amazing conversation with him.
It was really great. Yeah.
It was really great. So we didn't want to hold it. We wanted to get it out to you guys. We're going to put it out as a bonus episode. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with a regular episode. But in the meantime, you're going to get this incredible bonus episode. Okay?
All right. Well, in order to wrap it up, what do we got to do, Beth?
We got to spread some jam.
Not lies.